Can you please turn to there's a sheet in your booklet that has our requesting Dharma in the front. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto sujedoye olahadi samyao samputoje. Wu sang sen sen wei miao fa, bai qian wan jie nan zao yu. 我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义. The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. Good evening, everyone. All Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, Dharma Master, and all good Dharma friends, and all our Dharma friends online. Good evening. So tonight is May 30th, 2015. And given we actually have something a little bit unique tonight, so I don't know if you want to recite the sutra title still. We should? Okay. So what we will usually start in our sutra lectures, we recite the name of our sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, just to, you could say, invoke the names of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the Avatamsaka assembly to come join us. So it's on the booklet in front of you. There's a Chinese, you can see characters on the bottom with romanization below, and you can just follow along. We'll recite it 7 times. And we have a very simple tune. So please join in when you have the melody. Namo Da Fang Wang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Da Fang Wang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Da Fang Wang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Da Fang Wang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Da Fang Wang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Da Fang Wang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Bo Bu Zai. Namo Da Fang Wang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Nai Wei Bo Bu Zai. So good evening again, and welcome to Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. So tonight, Jing Husher and tonight, okay, yeah. Tonight's topic, sure.
So we so so we thought of doing something different this evening. Normally we lecture on the sutra itself, which you see in front of you, and we are on the sixth ground of the 10 grounds chapter of the Flower Dharma Sutra or the Avatamsaka Sutra. And we've been doing that in the absence of Reverend Heng Shuo, who was in Australia. But since he's been back and he's announced that he will continue from where he left off, meaning if you, in the future, when you look back at the recordings, there won't be any gaps. That means you wouldn't know that he actually stopped lecturing. That gives us the freedom then to explore different topics. And we thought for today that we will still relate it back to the sutra, but the topic for today would be the second paramita, which is the paramita of precepts. Now, paramita is a Sanskrit word meaning to go, to reach across. How do I, to reach the other shore, meaning it's, you can say that it's like a tool that you use, or like a boat. In fact, a boat, it will be a more suitable metaphor. So you use it like a boat to reach the other shore. What shore, or what do you reach across? The sea of suffering, meaning, say, the human condition, for example. So the Bodhisattva, from the first ground right up to the sixth ground, out of a total of 10 grounds, during the first 6 grounds, the Bodhisattva concentrates, he specializes in one paramita in every ground. So the first ground, he specializes in the paramita of giving. In the second ground, he specializes in the paramita of precepts. And I will, because my memory is really bad, I will defer to Jin Chuan Shi to give the list of the next 3, 4. Can you?
So the six paramitas starts with first one is generosity. Oh, the trick is if you always
Giving.
ask the audience.
Ask the audience?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the first one is giving, right? The giving is the first one, dana. The second one is shila, it's precepts. The third one, anybody has any patience, yeah? That is kshanti, patience. And then the fourth one, vigor, very good, virya, vigor. The fifth one, concentration, back. Dhyana, concentration. And the sixth one, which we're talking about in the sixth ground bodhisattva, is wisdom, prajna, so wisdom. So those are the 6 paramitas that we usually refer to when we talk about the bodhisattva path. The bodhisattva is one who cultivates the 6 paramitas to perfection, which is another word for paramita as well, or another translation for the word paramita.
So for today, we'll be using the overhead projector and the screen, which has yet to come down. And I just realized that before the lecture, I pull out the video, the audio feed to the computer. So people online may not be able to hear me right now, or hear us. If you can, then it's fine. If not, I apologize. You can hear? You okay. Now I need to plug my computer in and bring the screen down. So if everyone could just have some practice patience for the next few minutes.
I can introduce, and you do that. Okay, so tonight we have the topic being precepts. And this is something Jing He and myself have thought quite a bit about, because at one point at the 17,000 Buddhas, we had to do a couple classes. I'll wait for the screen. Is that it? So hopefully someone will stop the screen before it hits our head. No, keep going, keep going. Keep coming. Another 2 feet. Okay, I think is that clear? Then maybe turn on the projector. Okay, so this was we were teaching a couple of classes regarding the precepts, and this topic is a very important one. Maybe you can keep the backlight on. Yeah. Yeah, turn off the first one, the very front switch. You can keep the upstairs, that's fine. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and you can either turn on some backlights or as long as people can see a little bit. So we were teaching a class on the precepts, and it's starting. The projector is starting up. So, and we believe the precepts is a really important topic because it's, you could say, the foundation of Buddhist practice. When Buddhism came to America, meditation really came in. You know, people I think know about mindfulness, Zen meditation, all those kind of things. And when it came to the West, there was a de-emphasis on the precepts because people usually thought of precepts as the rules, you know, and no one really wants to follow the rules. So to be able to explain what the precepts actually are about, what their spirit is, how we hold it in our minds, their importance is, I think, very, very valuable. And it's not, I think, as what people often expect. Because usually we think of, you know, the religious precepts we find, for instance, in the Christian tradition, the Ten Commandments. And there are commandments from God. You know, God said, thou shalt do this, this, and this. The Buddhist precept is quite different. And so, how is it different? So that's tonight what we're going to discuss, what we're going to talk about. And so I think we can make it a little bit interactive as well. So if people have questions, please ask. This is something that I think is so important that we don't want to just have you listen and go, okay, 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 and at the end of the lecture go, what will happen? How does that apply to my life? Rather to really say, okay, so this is, how do I understand the precepts? How do I make sense of what I'm doing every day when I try to live a wholesome, virtuous life? Okay.
So the precepts form the whole foundation of the Buddha's teachings. Every single teaching of the Buddha requires the foundation of having the precepts first. So that's why the saying goes, from precepts you get samadhi or concentration, and then from concentration you get wisdom, which is what you need to transcend suffering. So tonight we will explore the benefits of maintaining the precepts and what are the attitudes that we can bring to the precepts. For example, what are the functions of precepts? Are precepts meant to bind us? Like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, like restrictive. I can't do this, I can't do that. What do the precepts mean to us? How do we view the precepts? And correspondingly, what kind of attitude should we bring once we understand what the precepts are? So I'm looking at some people who are squinting, looking at the screen. Is it legible? Is okay? It's fine? Okay. All right. So at any time you have any questions, raise your hand and we'll pause. So this is the first one. And this is meant to be interactive. Okay. I know this is puzzling. Okay, so what are precepts like? A banana, a mirror, an umbrella, or like a traffic light? And you don't have to answer right now. We'll come back to this at the end of the lecture. And hopefully by then, this might seem to have, now I know why it's a banana. First, before we go into the text, precepts, because of communication, precepts are written down. As in, if you want to know what the precepts are, you take a book that contains the teachings connected to the precepts, and then you read the precepts. So that's why we have letter here. Spirit versus letter. So there are some people who hold on to the precepts really strongly. They take it literally. If this is what the sentence says, this is what I hold on to. But because the Buddha's teachings, including the precepts, always have a corresponding mental factor. There's always something that we can relate back towards the mind. It's always psychological. And so there's, besides the letter, there's also the spirit. So when it comes to precepts, it's not just, say, understanding the letter of the precepts. For example, thou shalt, responsible speech, for example, is a precept. And it's not just a blind approach where I have to follow responsible speech. I shall not lie. I shall not use harsh or abusive words when I speak to people. And not just following that without understanding why we do that. So the why or the intention is the spirit. So to illustrate this principle, we thought we would use one example called fasting. So in precepts, for lay people, there are two kinds of precepts called the 5 precepts, which is no killing, no stealing, which means no taking what is not yours, no killing, no lying, no killing. I'm really okay. Why don't you?
I get to do all the memory stuff. No killing, no stealing. Of course, I can ask people, what's the third one? Yeah, no sexual misconduct. The fourth is no lying, and the fifth is no intoxicants. So that's the 5, right? No killing. So we don't go off and intentionally kill any creature, any living being, including ants and insects and any being at all. The second was no stealing. So anything that's not given to us. So in Buddhism, even if I find something on the floor, if I think somebody still thinks it's theirs, I don't just pick it up and take it. So it's not finders keepers. It's it's basically, what is not given. If somebody doesn't explicitly give it to me, or it's given to me, then I don't take it. The third one.
And I have a story to share regarding not taking what is not given. And Marek just told me the story, I think yesterday. So Marek was riding his bike on the streets of Berkeley, and he saw, what was it, $60, $60 or $80 in $20 bills lying by the side of the road. And because Marek is observing the precepts, he noted the money, and he was very mindful, and he just left it there. And he said later he met someone who came up to him and said, "Hey, did you notice seeing any money on the road?" Probably the person who lost the money. And Marek said, "Yes, I saw it." And the person was taken aback, like, "Oh, you saw it, but you didn't take it?" Which is what most people would probably do. "Oh, money, my lucky day. Finders keepers, losers weepers."
So yeah, so that's the second one. Third one, no sexual misconduct. So usually that's referring to adultery. We stay committed to our relationships. The fourth one is no lying. So we are true and honest. The last one is no intoxicants. We don't put anything in the mind that confuses it. So we're trying to learn about wisdom. We're trying to develop our inherent wisdom. So anything that we put in our minds that confuses our judgment, we don't want to put into it. So those are, you can say, the 5 precepts. And in addition to that, we have a few more. So layperson, so it's Marek, who's now a Nagarika. He's taking the 8 precepts. In addition to the 5, you have one that says you don't wear kind of fancy jewelry, decorate your body, put on makeup. I don't think Mark does that too much anyways. But so the idea is you're lessening your energy that's going out to attract. And at the same time, you're also lessening your mind that goes out for distraction. So for instance, you don't look at entertainments. So that's another kind of precept, which is no entertainments. Another part of it is refraining from more comfortable environments. We literally call it not sleeping on Hyatt luxurious beds. So you don't have a big water bed and just you lay down, and you forget about everything, and you're just, that's your, that's your beauty sleep or something. The idea is you're still mindful. You're still use your time to cultivate. And then finally, there's one which is not eating past noon, not eating at the improper times. And so for monastics, you basically, and people who hold the precepts, they eat from when the sun comes out, and you can see the lines on your hand, till the time when the sun is right at mid noon, 12 o'clock, roughly around that time. And that's the time, that's the appropriate time to eat. So in the afternoon and the evening, the monastics and people who've taken the 8 precepts, they don't eat. And so in our tradition, actually, Master Hua really emphasized that, and kind of had the tradition be 1 meal a day, kind of in the tradition of what the Buddha did. So basically, in India, people are familiar at all with the Buddhist tradition. Monks would go off an alms round once a day, and they would come back with a bowl full of food, and that would be their food. You know, they wouldn't cook for themselves, they wouldn't grow food for themselves. They just go off into the city and or little town and get a little bit of food, and that would be their food for the day. So that's how they live their life. So the Buddha said, what I give you is your 3 robes, your alms bowl, and you're as free as a bird. You can go anywhere you want. So that's the spirit. And so for the 8 precepts, it gets a little bit closer to, you could say, the monastic form, which has some elements of renunciation in it. So you get the fasting.
So people who take the 8 precepts, no bling. You won't see Marek with gold chains and flashy rings and earrings. And then there are also some people who take the Bodhisattva precepts for lay people. And they are some of the precepts are similar to the precepts that are taken by the 8 precepts, like Marek, who's training to be a monk. And that means on certain days, they don't eat afternoon, which means lunch is their last meal. And when I took the Bodhisattva precepts many years ago, I remember in the class, everyone was asking, oh, so if I can't eat afternoon, can I drink juice? And the instructor would say, yes, you can drink juice, but you have to filter the juice so there's no solids. For example, if it's orange juice, there's no pulp. So there'll be a lot of questions like, if it's afternoon, what happens if it's, if I use the sun and we are off the equator and the sun is not directly overhead when it's 12, can I still eat? Or can I eat when I'm traveling and I cross a timeline, a different time zone? It becomes really complicated. Yes? So there's a question saying, what if it's a hard piece of candy and you just suck on it and you don't eat it, right? You don't eat it. You see, it gets really complicated.
How about ice cream? You just put the ice cream in your mouth and just lets it melt in your mouth.
Yeah. So that's what happens. Yes.
Are there ever any times that you're forgiven, like if you're sick? Are you okay?
Yeah, there are a lot of exceptions. Precepts, the spirit behind precepts are meant to make you mindful of your, say, potential, of what you can do, but not everyone can be 100% accurate, maintaining precepts all the time. So precepts are meant to encourage someone, rather than like you have to do this, and if you don't, then yeah. So all these questions, candy, how about cotton candy, right? Cotton candy melts in the mouth and you don't have to chew. So there's a lot of questions, especially if you hold to the letter of the precepts. Strict, you interpret the precepts through language, through logic, rather than through the spirit. So what we have to show right now is what happens when you understand the precepts, the intention behind the precepts. Does it take on a whole different meaning? So we've given you the technical approach to the precepts, which means no eating after noon. And back at that time when people didn't carry watches, they would tell time by the sun. So when the sun is overhead. What happens now, right? And what happens when you understand the intention behind the precepts? So when it comes to fasting, what is the intention? So this is what Bodhidharma had to say. He says, the same holds true for observing a fast. Because this is an excerpt, it starts a bit abrupt. It's useless unless you understand what this really means. There you go. To fast means to regulate your body and mind so that they are not distracted or disturbed. So if you hold to the latter, you only think of fasting in terms of food. You don't think about fasting in terms of the mind. So he goes on to say to observe means to uphold the rules of discipline according to the Dharma. Fasting means guarding against the 6 attractions on the outside and the 3 poisons on the inside, and striving to contemplation to purify your body and mind. So what does this mean? 6 attractions on the outside. How do we engage the world? It's called the 6 attractions. Our eyes, we see things. Our ears, we hear things, conversations, music. Eyes, ears, nose, we smell. Tongue, we taste. Body, we have sensations. If I am sitting in a very comfortable sofa right now, comfortable. And then the mind is called the 6 attractions. These are the ways we engage with the world. Anytime we have a sensory input through any of the 6, the mind moves. It thinks. So if you were to say, you know how they hook up a ECG monitor to the heart and you get poop, 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 poop. If you have one for the mind, every time your eye sees something, your mind would poop, 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 poop. You hear something, you smell something, you touch. Different surfaces, different feelings. Poop, poop. The mind would move. So what Bodhidharma is saying is that fasting means guarding against how you engage with the world. And then the 3 poisons on the inside, he uses the word poisons. It means greed, anger, and ignorance. So when I see, what does it mean in day-to-day life? Well, I used to be a person who liked cars. I still do. It's a habitual way of thinking that I have. If I see the latest Ferrari, my mind will go poop, 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 poop. And habitually, I would say, whoa, that's a really nice car. And if I'm not paying any attention to my thoughts, I'll be like, whoa, if I had that car, I'll be driving around, it'll be really cool. And my mind will go poop, 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 and I'll forget I'm a monk. And like suddenly, poop, 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 like, hey, I'm a monk. I don't even have a driver's license anymore. And what would I do with a Ferrari? Ooh, no more thoughts. The Ferrari goes away. Okay, then Bodhidharma goes on to say fasting also includes 5 kinds of food. So the language here, as you will see in the remaining paragraphs, when the Buddha uses the word food, he doesn't mean literally just food. It means things that happen to us that gives the mind sustenance, food. So he says, first there's delight in the Dharma. This is the delight that comes from acting in accordance with the Dharma. Second is sitting quietly and watching the mind, meditation. Third is invocation. That means being mindful, using the mind and recollecting the qualities of, say, the Buddhas or the Bodhisattvas, but not in terms of them as faraway beings, but in terms of your own potential. Say, Guanyin Bodhisattva represents compassion. What is my potential for compassion? Fourth is resolution, to pursue, say, in the case of pursuing virtue, whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, which means mindfulness. If I see the Ferrari, poop, 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 oh, no, I shouldn't be thinking about that. It's not going to get me anywhere. So pull back. So whether I'm sitting, standing, walking, or lying down, which means in all times of my daily life, always be mindful. And the fifth is called liberation, liberation of your mind from worldly contamination. It means anything that makes your mind poop, 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 move. These 5 are the foods of fasting. Unless a person eats these 5 pure foods, he's wrong to think he's fasting. So Bodhidharma brings it back to the mind. It's not just food that you see in front of you and you look at your watch, it's 12:30, I shouldn't be eating anymore. It's not that at all. There's a lot more to it. You want to do this?
So maybe as a point, I think the Buddha's teachings, he says that his teachings are perfect in letter and spirit. So there's a sense that there's actually the letter of the precepts, which kind of give a frame to hold yourself in, to kind of have yourself as a standard. And then there's also the spirit. Basically, what is that precept leading you towards? And both are very important. There's a tendency, if you want to say, to go on either extreme, is if you just hold to the letter, then you attach to the letter of the precept, and you become very rigid. You can even become somewhat judgmental of other people. You know, your holding of it becomes tight. And in that way, it's not skillful. The Buddha says that actually can be an affliction, that just holding the precepts in and of itself is not an ultimate door to liberation, finally. It's on the path there. It's a tool we use to get there. But if we just say, okay, if I just hold the precepts and that's it, and don't have to work on my mind, that's not going to get us there. So rather, the first step is we can learn the letter, but then we also need to get the spirit. But if we say, oh, I just hold the spirit of my mind, and I just can break all the precepts I want, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, whatever. I can just meditate, enter samadhi, and just empty everything is empty, right? No, nothing to worry about. What to worry about? The problem is that karma is constantly happening. Karma being the causal, the linkages of our existence. We talked about this last couple of months here in the monastery, that what happens is basically we still have our habitual patterns that have certain patterns to them. So for instance, if I step in front of a truck, I can think it's empty, but if I get hit, I'm going to be in a lot of suffering. So there's certain things that still happen, although it's empty, it's quote unquote empty. But it's not to say, okay, so therefore we reject the letter and we just go for the spirit. You have to have both. So I just wanted to emphasize, the spirit and the letter, they're not in competition. They're actually mutually supportive. And so we want to read the last sections. And once you stop eating the food of delusion, if you touch it again, you break your fast. And once you break it, you reap no blessings from it. The world is full of deluded people who don't see this. They indulge their body and mind in all manner of evil. They give free rein to their passions, have no shame. And when they stop eating ordinary food, they call it fasting. How absurd. So I think just to use fasting as a place to start from, I think fasting is a practice that's not very well understood in the West, or not to say the West. Okay, that's too broad. I think in modern times in America, with our consumer society, fasting is not a value that we really ever hear about. It's like, oh, I'm gonna fast. Really? Are you gonna die? You're not gonna eat? That's crazy. We're used to, when we want food, it's immediately there in the fridge, and we just go and get it. We're thirsty and want something nice to drink, we go grab it and we just drink whatever we want. There's no space between feelings of something and it being immediately able to be satisfied. I mean, if you just imagine probably 300 years ago, the level of convenience is nothing like it was now. And probably about 1,000 years ago, people actually probably went hungry on not an irregular basis. Probably sometimes the crops might not grow that well, or there might be a famine, or they didn't have Safeway, they didn't have the supermarket right down the street. And so this idea of fasting, I think in the past wasn't so unfamiliar as it is now. And so for us in modern times with our value system, oftentimes fasting seems to be a very extreme practice. Gosh, that's a bit extreme and very unhealthy. But I would venture to say that in fact, if we look at our existence now, what having all those comforts immediately available to us in a way a bit weakens our ability to have strength in our mind. So what the Dharma gives, I think, is that there's a kind of strength of the mind that you develop from not giving into your sensual, these kind of quote unquote attractions, these 6 attractions. If you could say, I'm not going to go after comfort and pleasure, I'm going to actually just stay mindful in my mind and observe, there's actually a strength there that then you can use to cultivate to realize liberation. Because the Buddha basically said, it's not to say that the sense pleasures are quote unquote evil. That's not really what Buddhism talks about. It's not like they're evil or sinful or bad. He said basically they're very dangerous. And why are they very dangerous? Is because they don't last. You go and you try to find happiness from this pleasure, and what happens is you pick it up and it disappears. And you go for another one, it disappears. And you go on and on and on. And so he said it's like trying to relieve suffering by planting the seeds for more suffering. That's how the Buddha saw it. So that's why he said it's dangerous. It's not to say that sensual pleasures are not gratifying. He says they're very gratifying, but there's a danger to them. So what you want to find is a way out, to find a way that you can avoid the dangers of sensual pleasure. And he says, so that way you stay mindful and you quote unquote fast here. And this way in the Bodhidharma is talking about is fasting in a really at the mind ground level, not letting the mind go out and move from the 6 sense doors. So that's really the spirit of fasting. That's what we're doing in the precepts.
So if this were a movie and this particular slide was a movie scene in that movie, you would have this old person who's very wise, and you have 2 people who are probably younger, and they always depict younger people as not being that wise, and they would be arguing. Oh, you ate after 12 and you just broke the precept. And another person said, no. Or the other person said, oh, I just fasted for 1 day. And the other person said, oh, I fasted for 2 days. And it making the competition. And the master sitting there in his wisdom just looks at them, shakes his head and say, you're supposed to be guarding your mind. It's not just about food, but you should be aware of your thoughts. That's what it means to fast. To be mindful, to be really mindful on these days when you're holding the fast, and watch your mind, because everyone's lifestyle is so busy. If you don't take the time on this day, I'm going to watch my mind, we let go. We go out the door, we walk into the office, we drive, we walk down the street, and we are constantly bombarded through the 6 senses. And we forget. Oh, look, a puppy. It's going to rain. It's cold. That's what happens all the time. So the old master is sitting there and says, on these days, just pay extra attention to your thoughts. That's what it means. Okay, next slide. Yes.
For some religion, fasting means not to eat certain kind of food. You can choose other food instead of that food. For some other religion, then fasting probably means that you don't eat in the daytime. But when the sun goes down, you can eat all you want, as much as you want. But I don't remember a Buddhist teaching on fasting. Can you elaborate on that?
So the Buddhist teaching on fasting is not it's not food. Food is one representation of fast. But as we just saw in the slide above, fasting means to guard the mind through the 6 senses, meaning how we engage with the world, to pay really close attention to how we engage with the world. That's called fasting.
I read the 5 things you have on the screen before, but I don't recall or any particular, special teaching of the Buddha on fasting. In those with those 5 meanings for fasting.
Avatamsaka precepts again? Yeah, if you would like, there's various texts on the 8 precepts. So there's if you go and let me say there's a couple of suttas I know on the 8 precepts. There's the Upasasika Sutra, which has the lay bodhisattva precepts in there, and I think it also might talk about the 8 precepts and fasting a little bit. The teaching
and also texts on the 6 major and how many minor bodhisattva 26 28 28 minor bodhisattva precepts also describe fasting.
So but
That you don't eat at inappropriate time.
yeah, it's not
after
afternoon. Yeah, so that's
one. Okay.
so that's
I'm familiar with that one.
yeah, so
But
that's
not-
the actual the precept. So for us, we're just using this as a so we're not encouraging everybody to go and fast, because I think that's a dharma door for people who would like to do that, they can. But I think for lay people, usually the 5 precepts is a really wholesome place to start. And in the Buddhist tradition, oftentimes lay people, when they come to the monastery for a day, they would take the 8 precepts as a kind of time they can draw near the monastery and cultivate in the monastic environment, because the monastic environment really supports holding the 8 precepts. You know, when you're in the monastery, you know, when you want to eat, you can't just go and open the monastery fridge and kind of, you know, get whatever you want to eat. You're kind of in the form here of cultivation, right? So, but in your layperson's home, then oftentimes it's a different environment. So holding the 8 precepts might be more difficult.
If you're not holding the precept that mentions fasting, don't worry about it. We just use this as a way to illustrate understanding the precepts, the importance of understanding precepts, rather than just following a precept without knowing the intention behind it.
But I think what you're asking about, the various religions teach about fasting in different ways, I think is actually very true. And I think you look at various religious traditions, they all talk about fasting. And in Buddhism, there's quite a bit of teachings on that as well. Because in Buddhism, we're actually cultivating our mind and looking at and watching our mind. And one of the very deep desires is actually food. I think if you were to actually watch your mind and you cultivate, you'll see that when you see a food that you like, the mind goes, and it goes out and grabs it. And so to try to start training yourself to be able to let go is a very, one place you can apply energy. And for monastics, it's a place that we try our best, because that's one thing that we have to eat every day, is we have to eat. You can't just not eat at all. So that becomes a place that we use as our practice. You know, but the beginning step, if you don't kill, steal, sexual misconduct, lie, or take intoxicants, that's the place to start, because those are actually creating really bad karmic effects in your existence later on. Fasting is an additional training if you want to kind of start going at your sensual desires, and to try to train yourself to be able to renounce that and enter a more, you could say, still place in your mind.
We have a question.
Being raised Jewish, when you fast, it's considered a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a blessing that brings you closer to God. If you do want to take part in this precept and fast, is it considered a karma that actually is a blessing and that gives you more good karma? Or is it just your personal decision to add this additional precept? Or does it actually give you better karma, such as with Judaism, when you do take part in fasting, it's a mitzvah?
Okay.
Does that question?
Karma is that, you could say karma is cause and effect. So it's an effect of something that you do. It's not like a blessing that's given to someone, like a present. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe I can answer. So what's I think this is actually a very important concept in the West, in the sense of this idea of karma, that we usually think of karma a little bit like, sometimes like fate or like blessings that come to us, like we do something good and we'll have good luck or something. that's actually not quite how Buddhism works, the kind of idea of karma works. Karma is really intentional action. That's actually what it means. Karma literally means action. And the Buddha says, what I call karma is intentional action. And so basically, when we do something and we intend to do it, it plants a seed in our mind that will bring results in the future. And so for instance, so for sure, if I say make a vow to hold the 8 precepts, for a day and a night, and then I hold it well, and I finish the day and I finish it, that plants a very deep seed in our mind. The Buddha actually says, in fact, it's actually more good, quote unquote, good karma, goodness is created, than if you had all the wealth of the whole world. And, it's way more than that. To be able to purify your mind in that way is really, really wonderful. And so basically, it's a little bit different because there's a different, you could say, structure than Judaism, where I think, I'm not that familiar, but you have a kind of God that's kind of giving the blessings. The Buddha, in the Buddhist teaching, is more like a guide. He's saying, if you do these actions, they'll lead to these results. So I'm giving you these tools, and if you apply them, you will see the goodness in it yourself, and you will be able to understand the causal relationship yourself. It's not something magical. It's not like I'm giving you something. So that's the spirit of the fasting. So the idea is, you do it yourself, and you'll see that bit by bit, your mind will become freer and freer. It's an actual practice that you engage in.
And since we're on the topic of other religions, the other religion that's really famous for fasting is Islam. And they have really, really good reasons behind the fasting month, which is to foster empathy and compassion for people who do not have enough to eat. That's one of the main reasons behind why Muslims fast. So the next slide is that to give an idea about the spirit of the precepts. Originally, the Buddha did not lay down any precepts. He did not describe the precepts. The only precepts were, for example, this one: do no evil, only do good, purify your mind, and that is what all Buddhas teach. That was the precept sutra spoken by Kashyapa Tathagata. And Shakyamuni Buddha, when he came to this world, in the beginning, there were also no precepts. Only this verse: carefully watch over your words, purify your own mind, do no evil with the body. Just this is purifying the 3 karmas. Able to practice this way will lead one to become a great immortal. Simple. Just 3 things: mouth, body, mind. That's it. Just pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to what your body does, and pay attention to what your speech says. That's it. Simple.
So those are the 3 karmas. When you say 3 karmas in this case, because those are the 3 places of action. And so there's only 3 places if you really think about it, right? The body, what we do, the mouth that we use to speak, and the mind that we use to think. So that's where we take action. So actually, if you look at that very last line, it says, do you say there? The first 12 years. So what it says is the Shakyamuni Buddha spoke this for the uneventful shramanas. I don't know if people know what that means. In the first 12 years. So what that means is, in the very beginning, for the monks, when they became monks, the Buddha didn't really give any precepts. He just told them basically this, do good, do no evil, purify your mind. And then later on, he went into more detail, because at that point the monks became a little bit more unruly. They maybe had a little bit more kind of more respected, were more established. And so then the Buddha started giving more and more rules as things came up and people brought it up to him. Says, okay, yeah, you shouldn't kill. Oh yeah, you shouldn't go and lie. You shouldn't pretend to be enlightened when you're not enlightened. Those are bad things to do. And so he started to, basically telling the monks, after they did something, no, that was unskillful. So that's the spirit of, in terms of these precepts, is that they're given in response to the conditions that arise. Which I think is a very interesting idea. It's not that the Buddha kind of say thou shalt not or don't do this. He was actually in many ways requested to establish those precepts. Basically, someone would come to him and says, what was the right way to do it? And he said, okay, I lay down these precepts for the welfare of the Sangha, for the betterment of your training, for inspiring faith in people's cultivation. So this is why the precepts are there.
So this is what Bodhidharma in his breakthrough sermon had to say about, again, spirit versus letter and the intention that we bring towards the precepts. So he says mortals or people just like us who don't understand true practice and blindly perform good deeds are born into the three higher realms of existence within the three realms. And he goes on, and he asks us the question he just said, what are these three higher states? He said, those who blindly perform the 10 good deeds and foolishly seek happiness are born as gods in the realm of desire. Those who blindly observe the 5 precepts, which is what we've been discussing, and foolishly indulge in love and hate are born as men in the realm of anger, or women in the realm of anger. Basically, you're just born as human beings. That's what he's trying to say. And for those who blindly cling to the phenomenal world, believe in false doctrines, and pray for blessings are born as demons in the realm of delusion. These are the 3 highest states of existence. And it says, what are 3 lower states? They are where those who persist in poisoned thoughts and evil deeds are born. So, those whose karma from greed is greatest become hungry ghosts. Those whose karma from anger is greatest become sufferers in hell. And those whose karma from delusion is greatest become beasts. These 3 lower states, together with the previous 3 higher states, form the 6 states of existence. And he says, from this you should know that realize that all karma, painful or otherwise, comes from your own mind. It doesn't come from anywhere else. It's not someone punishing you. It's not this God creating this hell or this heaven and judging where you should go, but it's a result of your own actions. And he says, if you can just concentrate your mind and transcend its falsehood and evil, the suffering of the 3 realms and the 6 states of existence will automatically disappear. And once free from suffering, you're truly free.
Maybe I'll say something briefly about this. So basically, what you see here is the intention behind holding the 5 precepts. So we often talk about the 5 precepts here and say how wonderful they are. And I think for many people in the assembly, they think they probably have actually taken commitments and said, I vow to uphold the precept against killing to the end of my life, right? So there's these kind of vows that you can take formally. And so, however, you can see in this particular sutra or this particular sermon, right, Bodhidharma, the intention that you use to hold the precepts is very important, because the intentionality that we have leads us to where we go in the future. So this is taking it to the realms of rebirth. That's what's talking about, the 6 realms of rebirth, and that's, I would say that assumes, I know for different people might have different backgrounds, so that assumes within the Buddhist tradition there's the idea of rebirth and kind of this going on, life after life. So that's what's one process. If you want to look at it, there's also, you could say, looking at this moment of our minds, of what's going on. So even if we hold the precepts with a mind that's basically, it says here, the first one, blindly perform the 10 good deeds, which is, basically the 5 precepts plus no greed, no hatred, no delusion, and using our mouth wisely, no harsh speech, no frivolous speech, not breaking people up, no divisive speech. And so basically, with the 10 good deeds, the screen changed. The 10 good deeds, if we do them blindly, then what happens is we're just following the precepts without really understanding. It's not leading us to liberation. So generally, our life will be happy. I think what you'll find when you start holding the 5 precepts is that your existence is actually pretty happy. The friends that you make probably end up holding the 5 precepts as well. You'll see that for most people, the suffering comes from breaking of precepts. If you look at a family, if everybody in the family held the 5 precepts really well, everybody was honest with one another, they actually weren't, killing things, they weren't harming each other, there's actually a very peaceful and happy existence. So that's what the precepts are. What he's saying, that your life is like the gods. It's very, very happy, but it's not ultimate. So that's why in the gods, in the realms of desire, is not really where we want to go, because that's still trapped in the realms of conditioned existence. So what we want to do is take the precepts to go for something greater, something deeper, more profound. Right?
Yeah, and if you look at this from a psychological state, it says someone who's greedy, greed is greatest, become hungry goes. If you know anyone who never has enough, whose sole purpose in life is to have more, always want more fame, more money, more cars. And if you look at their substance as a person or their personality, it's pretty hollow. Yeah, not, and say someone, he says, who anger is greatest. I've had periods in my life where I've been overtaken by anger. And in terms of the mind, you are just consumed and you are not in control. Your thoughts, your angry thoughts control you. There have been points where I've said, I don't care. I want to do something, someone holds me back and say, you better don't, I don't care. If you do that, you can't take it back. I don't care. Logic goes out the window. And people do things they regret. Anger, that's what it means. You create your own mental hell. So a lot of this can be seen as psychological states. People who murder someone, sometimes they never get over it. No matter what they do, they cannot escape the memory of that thing that they have done. And their whole life just becomes really bleak. So the precepts prevent us from doing things that we may end up regretting for the rest of our lives and have no way to take back that moment in time. So Chin Chuan Shu was speaking about intention, so I'll let him explain it next.
So right intention claims the second place in the path. So the path here is the Noble Eightfold Path, which we also spoke about a number of times. Right, the first one's right view, then right intention, right, I think, action, right livelihood, right speech, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And so the second one is right intention. And so between right view, wow, this is real complicated. Between right view and the triad of moral factors that begins with right speech, because the mind's intentional function forms the crucial link connecting our cognitive perspective with our modes of active engagement in the world. The cause for the endless competition, conflict, injustice, and oppression does not lie outside the mind. These are all just manifestations of intentions driven by greed, by hatred, by delusion. This is by Bhikkhu Bodhi. He has a book called The Noble Eightfold Path, where he talks about right intention. And so
basically, having proper understanding gives you the right intention, which then forms the foundation of when you maintain the precept, either through your body, your mouth, or your mind. In summary.
Yeah, so basically, that's why I would say it's valuable to actually study some of the Dharma, because then your understanding deepens so that you can even have the right intentionality to make the proper actions. So for instance, if you don't have an understanding of the Dharma, you can hold on to the precepts in a way that's just literal, or in a way that's judgmental, or that's not really that skillful. So the understanding really helps. I actually wanted to point out the very ending there for Bodhidharma's sermon, talking about how basically you'll be able to kind of see through falsehood and evil. There's this teaching in the precepts which talks about really perfecting the precepts. You get to a point where you're holding the precepts, but you're not holding them. And that doesn't mean you don't hold the precepts and you break the precepts. So that sometimes you hear and you go, wait, what does that mean? What it means is that you hold the precepts, but you're not attached to the precepts. And I think that's a very interesting idea, if you kind of reflect on it. So basically, what that I would say, if you imagine, I, so for instance, won't kill. I don't kill. I make a commitment to kill. So my actions, I don't kill. But let's say I see somebody else killing, then I don't judge them. Because when the moment you have a judgmental thought, you're actually attaching to a point of view that you're using to make yourself kind of feel better than the other person. So there's a really, you could say, skillful place you need to hold your mind when you're engaging in spiritual practice in Buddhism, where you're basically holding to the practices, but you're not attaching to the practice in a way that reinforce the self. Yeah?
Comes to relationships, like building a friendship or meeting another person or just friendship. So you the one that's holding the 5 precepts, like for example, non-killing, is really important. And if you have a friend who's developing a friendship, that you know that person does eat, kill. Should you even start the relationship, or stay away from it, kindly, and not start a relationship, build something because they are not in the same values, or how do you approach that?
It's a bit weird to ask a monk about relationship advice, right?
Friendship, really.
Friendship, okay. Well, like what Jintrasha said, precepts are only for yourself. But if you really understand the spirit of the precepts, which we'll come to after this. So Jintrasha mentioned holding the precepts is look inside your mind. It's a tool, it's a mirror, Remember the first slide, the mirror? It's a mirror for you to look at your thoughts, the intention behind all your actions, right? The second one is when you understand the spirit of the precepts. For example, no killing. No killing, what does it really mean, no killing? I know physically in my body, I should not intentionally harm another living being, be it an animal, an insect, or a human being. But what does that really mean? What was the Buddha trying to say? So someone who studies this further realizes, I'm supposed to respect all life. Why? Well, if someone were to do the same to me, I wouldn't like it. So someone who slowly investigates the precepts comes to the conclusion, it's for many reasons. It's to respect people. Even animals, they have the instinct. They flee when they sense they're in danger. No animal will come and eat me. No, they won't do that. Is to bring up compassion for people. And then once you understand all these qualities, that's what Jintrasha means. You hold the precepts without holding the precepts. You naturally are nice to people. You see an insect, say, in CDTB, it rains and the earthworms all come up. And some people see that they know the sun is coming up and the earthworms will get baked in the sun. They very, very carefully pick up the worm from the sidewalk and place it back on the grass, right? So if you ask them, are you maintaining the precept? They probably say, oh, yeah, I guess I was. Actually, I wasn't just killing, I was trying to protect the life. But they do it naturally. And this comes once you understand the precepts. So if you have compassion, then you, say your friend who is doing things that you choose not to do for yourself, from compassion also comes understanding. This person is at a point in their life where I used to be before. where I used to be before. And so does that make this person a bad person? So, so understanding the precepts is really, really important.
Maybe to add to that, so on one side, we don't want to use it to look down on anybody. But at the same time, in terms of forming friendships and relationships, I actually do think trying to find good spiritual friends or good friends on the path is actually very valuable. And I have to say, there's nothing like having a friend who actually holds the 5 precepts, who seriously holds them. I mean, that means that we'll talk to that. Okay, because just imagine. Let's say that I think a really important one is the 4th precept, right? Yeah, 4th precept, no lying. So that means that person, in every intentional moment in their mind, will not lie to you ever. Now that's a pretty powerful thought, very powerful statement. You know, this person is committed to be honest with you at all times, and you know that, and you can trust in that. There's a shared level of trust in something. That's really important, I think, in relationships in general. So I would say the 5 precepts are almost like just the seeds for a good relationship. And in a little bit in society, we might have lost that as people kind of are living kind of just going with whatever feeling at the moment. We'll get to that side? Okay. But I think that basically, I think they're actually very valuable tools for forming friendships. So you can find people who do really believe in those things. Yes?
What if they, for instance, are in the military and it's their job and their family and they had to kill to protect themselves or others? There was no choice. Then what?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So the question is, if you were in the military, what would happen, given that it's your job? So there's one, the Eightfold Path that I gave, which was I think the 5th one, roughly, 4th or 5th one, which is right livelihood. And so the Buddha would say that actually we try to find a livelihood that doesn't involve harming other people. And so it's tricky if that's somebody's job and that's what they're doing. It's going to be, there's going to be karmic results of those decisions that we do. So even if you're in the middle of the war and you have to, you protect yourself because somebody's shooting at you, you kill the person, that person still has a family, that person has a whole existence, and you've entered into their karmic flow and changed something in them, that's going to affect your mind. I mean, we have all these, I don't know what they call it, PTSD and various things that happen that people actually have these experiences. So it's not like there's no karmic results to what we do. So the Buddha is just saying, if you really want to get free, let me explain to you that when you do this, these are the effects. These are the effects. That's all he's saying. But if you still choose to do that, and that's what you're doing, the Buddha is not forcing. He's not saying, I'm forcing you to take this path. It's your choice. So actually the Buddha himself came from a warrior caste. He was from that, and he gave a lot of his teachings come from a little bit of the military language. You're going to, but the war that you're fighting is the war in your mind. So you're fighting greed, hatred, and delusion. And if you really want to be victorious, that's what you're getting victory over, not through killing other people. Yeah.
So Jin Chuan Shu touched on the subject of people around us, people we care for, our loved ones. So family. How many families have how many families have broken up because someone in the family were consumed by intoxicants, either drugs or alcohol, or through affairs, and broken that trust of marriage, or someone who you could never quite trust. I knew a family friend who one of the sons were into gambling and he would always lie. You could never trust him because he would tell you one thing, but he had an ulterior motive to get money or something, and he would do anything for that. So how much do we respect the people around us? So precepts, when I first took the precepts, I saw it as being really restrictive, like the 5 precepts. I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this. But if someone at that time had asked me, do you want your nieces and nephews to grow up around people they can trust? I would say yes. Do you want them to be in relationships with people who will never cheat on them, or to marry someone like that? Of course. Do you want them to encounter people who will never lie to them or hurt them physically or verbally? Yes. Then the next natural question would be, then what am I doing? What is my contribution then to the people around me? So family, that's one. And then the next one is socially, in a community. What does it mean to be in a community where people trust each other? What kind of friends do I want? what kind of friend am I to my friends? So that's what precepts do. They expand the scope of your mind, the potentials of how you see the different perspectives, and you start seeing things from different angles. You want- And one of the things that's being used to explain precepts, so if you look at the top line and you follow my mouse, it goes from 5 precepts, the 8 and 10 precepts, the bhikshu and bhikshuni precepts, and the bodhisattva precepts. So the 5 precepts are precepts that lay people hold. And the 8 and 10 precepts, Marek right now holds the 8 precepts because he's a trainee. Next month, Marek will graduate and become a novice monk. Fingers crossed, it's not yet. And he will hold the 10 precepts. And so when you see him after he holds the 10 precepts, he will start wearing a gray robe. And then the 2 of us sitting up here hold the bhikshu precepts, and nuns hold the bhikshuni precepts. And then there's the bodhisattva precepts, which we also hold, and which lay people could also hold. So what did the Buddha had to say? He says that if you hold the 5 precepts well, if you understand the reasons behind the precepts, and you apply it well, that's the minimum that you need for a human rebirth. That means that's what it takes to be human. The 5 precepts represent basic human values or qualities. And then the 8 or 10 precepts gives you one step further. It means a heavenly rebirth. Or if you look at it from a psychological way of seeing it, your mind will be like a god. Peaceful, you'll be calm, and you will be satisfied. You have enough. And then to end suffering, to solve the human condition, you need the precepts of the monks and nuns. And then to reach Buddhahood, you need the bodhisattva precepts. The bodhisattva precepts bring forth qualities such as compassion. They really make you aware of the suffering of other people and how you can play a role in helping others reduce their suffering.
Just say also one note. So although right here it seems like there's almost like a direct link between the 5 precepts and say human rebirth, still actually the key element is intention. So for instance, if you take the 5 precepts with the intention for realizing Buddhahood, then the seed of holding the 5 precepts is actually for Buddhahood. So that's why the intentionality of our mind is so important. But if I just take the 5 precepts just so they'll have a peaceful existence, then that's the fruition of your precept holding too. I mean, so the intentionality that we create is really, really forms the future of what our future of our existence. Yeah. Okay. Avatamsaka Sutra. So this is the sutra that we chanted in the beginning. The name of the sutra is the Avatamsaka Sutra. So we read this. It says, the Bodhisattva holds the precepts with equality. That is, he should represent all living beings in holding the precepts and transfer the merit and virtue from his own cultivation of precepts to all living beings. The Bodhisattva stands in for living beings who don't hold the precepts and holds precepts on their behalf. The Bodhisattva's upholding of the precept is not done on account of fear, out of stupidity. I was like, out of stupidity, or doubt or delusion, or out of a private quest for his own nirvana. The upholding of precepts is carried out only for the sake of all beings, for the sake of succeeding in the path of the Buddha, and for the sake of realizing the Dharma of all Buddhas. So this is exactly what we just talked about before. So for instance, the Bodhisattva's intention for holding, to say, the 5 precepts is for Buddhahood, namely on behalf of all living beings. It's not for his own benefit. It's not for even his own liberation from suffering. It's because he wants to benefit all living beings. So that's the heart we bring. And what I really like about the precepts is that actually when the Buddha explains it, it says actually it's just a natural functioning of our awakened nature. This is just something that how we would naturally interact with other living beings. And the precepts is just giving us a guideline so that we can reconnect with our compassionate heart underneath. So that's I say the underlying spirit of the precepts. It's not actually to be restrictive. It's actually to liberate, to open the heart. Where before we might have seen an insect and immediately killed it, thinking that somehow it's bothering me, therefore I killed the insect. But all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, I don't want to kill it. Actually, I should respect it. Actually, it could have been my mother in the past life. Actually, we're all one substance. So how can I go and kill something else? Okay, and so your heart, from the act of holding the precepts, bit by bit, opens and opens and opens, because you're not going out and kind of breaking this fundamental nature we have that knows that we're all interconnected.
So if we look at someone like this bodhisattva, the bodhisattva stands in for all the living beings who don't hold precepts and hold precepts on their behalf. How can someone like that be judgmental? When they see someone else not doing something that they themselves will not do, they would say, this is why I'm holding the precepts. And maybe one day you too can hold the precepts. But in the meantime, I'm holding it for everyone. This person will not be filled with, how would I say, righteousness. In fact, he will be very peaceful, calm, and be happy. I guess someone like this, if I were to imagine someone like that, would have a very, how you say, like a very serene mind that's very well wholesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is from the second ground. It's the second ground chapter of the 10 grounds. Yeah. Yes.
A bunch of mothers, otherwise known as termites, that are ruining your home, and even if you don't do anything, if you have to sell the house, then someone else will do something because you would have to disclose it and whatever, so on and so on. Something has to be done no matter what because of all those uncles and mothers and termites. So what would you do?
I can't. To know what to do would be to understand what got you there in the first place, as to your relationship with the termites. But what I can do is I can share this story of termites in my own home, and what my mother did, and the disbelief that I had and my father. So we were living in this home, and we had termites. The termites were under the floorboards, and so my mom at that time was observing the precepts, and she did not want to do anything to harm the termites. So what she did was, she kind of, how would I say, in her mind, she said, if one understands cause and effect, then there's probably a relationship between the termites and our family, and something must be going on behind that we don't quite understand. So what she did was she wrote a note to the termites. Okay, she wrote a note and said, "Dear termites, we know you're just trying to survive, but you are destroying our property, and we have to take steps to maintain, to protect our property. And if you don't stop this, then we'll be forced to take action." She wrote a note, she pasted it there, but that's not the only thing she did. So she gave them an eviction notice. This is our place, this is our property, you have to get out. What she also did was she transferred merit, meaning she recited a mantra called the Great Compassion Mantra. And with all her heart, she said, "I'm reciting this on behalf of the termites." And she didn't have any thoughts of My mom's a very gentle person, so she didn't have any thoughts of animosity to the termites, and she really wanted the termites just to live, but not to be harmed. 2 weeks later, there were no more signs of the termites. And me and my dad just look at each other like, what? Because everyone knows termites never leave. Once they are there, and they reproduce, they breed, and they never ever leave. So it happened once. Okay? And then it happened again. A few years later, the termites came back. And guess what? My mom did the same thing, and it worked. So
So what you do is you call Jing Hersher's mom. So you have termites. Jing Hersher's mom, please, can you come to our house?
termite whisperer. Okay, we'll just skip this and go to this. And for that, I have to reduce the size of the slide. And are the numbers clear? Okay.
So we'll give you a little bit of a Buddhist cosmology here. So for those who are not familiar with Buddhist cosmology, here's a little taste of it.
So in the beginning, a few slides ago, we talked about go up. Okay, I will go up. I will talk about heavenly lifespans, right? So is life short or is it long? To us, it's very long. Is it high enough? Perfect? Oh, okay, I thought meant higher, but it's perfect. Okay. So humans, 80 years, and we put a sad face. Why we have a sad face? Well, these are the different heavens. Okay, these are the 6 desire heavens. You got the heaven of the 4 kings, heaven of the 33 gods, the Suyama heaven, the Tushita heaven. And in terms of human years, this is their lifespan. 9 million years in the first heaven. 9 million years. Meaning you go up to the heaven, right? And then you say, oh, I better go tell all my friends that I just got to heaven. You look down and they're already dead, because 1 second in heaven is like a long time on earth. Then the next heaven, called the 33 Devas, 36 million years. And it goes on and on and on until you reach, what is this, 320 billion years? The orange one? And this heaven, you don't reach through blessings. This heaven you reach through practice. People who have held the precepts really well, and they have the right attitude towards themselves and to the people around them, their sense of well-being is so strong that when they sit down and they meditate, they they easily get into what we call the first dhyana. And people who can get into this state, when their body ends, they get reborn in this heaven. And their lifespan is 320 billion years. I think, what's that, the Big Bang? How anyone knows how the Big Bang, 9 billion years or 90 billion years? Anyone? No? Maybe someone can Google it later. Yeah. Basically, you can watch the rise and fall of universes and planets with this lifespan. Yeah. 14.5 billion years. That's the age of our universe. There you go. First dhyana heaven, you see the universe come and go.
So just gives lesson. You give some perspective, I guess. So what are all our problems every day of our lives is can be a little bit less.
So this is a list that we took from the 100 Dharmas, and the 100 Dharmas, you could say, comes from a branch of Buddhism that looks into the psychological state of the mind. And the 11 wholesome Dharmas are positive attitudes of the mind that we can develop. And the 6 fundamental afflictions and the 20 derivative afflictions are, you could say, when our mind gives rise to these states,